Right at my husband's sister's wedding, I went into labor and my mother-in-law locked me in the bathroom. My name is Gwen, and if life had gone differently, I think I could have had a pretty wonderful story to share. I was on the brink of welcoming my first child into the world with Jason, the love of my life. I remember how we'd spend those nights talking about our future, imagining the tiny hands and feet of our baby girl and all the little family moments we'd build together. Jason was incredible from the very beginning of my pregnancy. He's one of those people who lights up with joy at the smallest things, so the idea of becoming a father had him glowing. He took it upon himself to make sure I was comfortable, supporting me in every way you could imagine. It wasn't just in words either. He'd always say, "Just tell me what you need, and I'll do it." And he meant it. Around this time, though, Jason's family was also preparing for another big event, his sister Lisa's wedding. I'd always liked Lisa. She was warm, open, and she truly treated me like family. Jason's family was excited about the wedding, and even though I was 9 months pregnant and nearing my due date, I wanted to be there for Lisa. There was this sense of family duty, but more than that, I wanted to show up for her because I genuinely cared about her. However, the other side of Jason's family was a little different, especially his mother, Margaret. I'd always known Margaret to be a bit controlling and set in her ways. She believed she knew best about everything, and in her mind, her approval was necessary for anything in the family to feel right. She had this intense authority over her children, and while Lisa and Jason's other sister, Sam, tried to please her, it often seemed like they walked on eggshells around her. When she first learned I was planning to attend the wedding despite being pregnant, she made her disapproval clear. "Gwen, you shouldn't be at the wedding," she'd said. "You're pregnant. Lisa doesn't need your help, and besides, all eyes should be on her." It stung to hear, even if I knew what she was trying to imply. But Lisa felt otherwise. She'd been one of my biggest supporters, constantly reminding me that she wanted me to be there with her, even if I was waddling down the aisle by then. She'd taken my hands in hers once and said, "Gwen, you have to be here. You're like a sister to me. My family wouldn't feel complete without you." Those words had filled me with the confidence to ignore Margaret's protests, thinking that this was just another case of her being her usual overbearing self. But Margaret's lingering looks of disapproval whenever she saw my belly told me that maybe it wasn't so simple. There was something in her eyes that felt colder, harsher than just concern. I tried to shake it off, but her looks, her words, it all left a quiet worry in me that I couldn't quite ignore. The week before the wedding was a whirlwind. Jason and I were already anxious about our daughter's arrival, making last-minute adjustments to the nursery and packing a hospital bag that we kept by the front door. The wedding preparations were just another layer of frenzy, but I wanted to keep up with everything, especially since Lisa seemed so genuinely happy to have me involved. Every time she'd catch me in a quiet moment, she'd grin and say, "Gwen, you're a trooper. I honestly can't believe you're doing all this at 9 months." Jason would shake his head and chuckle. "You know, Gwen," he'd say with a fond smile, "once she sets her mind on something, there's no stopping her." Margaret, however, was a different story. 2 days before the wedding, she called Jason and me over to her house under the pretense of discussing the wedding details. I went reluctantly, partly because my back was killing me, but I figured maybe she had some well-intentioned motherly advice for us or wanted to give us a little time to talk. When we arrived, though, she didn't even give me a chance to sit before jumping right into her speech. "Gwen, listen," she started, fixing me with that steely gaze of hers. "You really need to rethink attending the wedding." I glanced at Jason, hoping he'd say something to cut through the tension. But he just gave me a tight-lipped smile and a reassuring squeeze on my hand. So I took a breath and replied, "Margaret, I appreciate your concern, but I've promised Lisa I'll be there, and I want to support her." Her expression turned icy, her jaw tightening. "Support her? You're 9 months pregnant, Gwen," she said, stressing each word as if I hadn't noticed my own belly. "What if something happens at the wedding? It's not safe for you or for the baby." "Margaret," Jason cut in, his tone gentle but firm. "We talked about this. Gwen and I have decided together that she'll be there, and I'll be right by her side, watching out for both of them." Margaret's face softened just a bit when she looked at Jason, but only for a moment. She turned back to me, her brow furrowed, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Gwen, I think you're being selfish," she said quietly, but her voice carried a weight that felt as hard as stone. "All eyes should be on Lisa. A heavily pregnant woman at a wedding. It will be a distraction." The words stung, and I could feel my cheeks flush with anger. But before I could respond, Lisa entered the room, having heard the tail end of our conversation. "A distraction? Mom, seriously?" she said, arms crossed, her gaze challenging. "Gwen is family, and I want her there. She's practically my sister. Why are you making this such a big deal?" Margaret shook her head, a sigh escaping her. "Lisa, honey, you don't understand. It's just your day should be perfect. You don't need the added worry of Gwen going into labor or feeling unwell." Lisa scoffed, walking over to me and putting an arm around my shoulders. "Mom, stop. I'll be worried about Gwen either way, whether she's here or not. If she's feeling up to it, she should be there." Jason's hand tightened in mine, a silent reassurance that we were united in this. Margaret glanced from me to Jason to Lisa, her shoulders stiffening with each passing second. Finally, she held up her hands in surrender. "Fine," she said, though her tone was far from agreeable. "But don't say I didn't warn you." She paused, looking directly at me with an intensity that made my stomach twist. "Just try to stay in the background. This isn't your day." With that, she turned and briskly left the room. Lisa looked at me apologetically. "I'm so sorry, Gwen. She's just being Mom." I shrugged, trying to keep my voice steady. "I understand. I just want you to have a beautiful day. That's all." Lisa gave me a warm, grateful smile. "And you being there makes it that much more beautiful. Don't let her get to you." But even as we left her house that day, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that Margaret was far from done. The morning of the wedding was filled with an almost electric excitement. I could feel the buzz in the air as Jason and I got ready together. He was nervous, adjusting his tie over and over while checking his watch, making sure we weren't running late. For once, I was thankful for the distraction, something to focus on besides Margaret's intense stare from the day before. "You sure you're up for this?" Jason asked, coming over to gently rest a hand on my belly. He looked down at me with such softness, his eyes searching mine. "If you're too tired or anything feels off, we'll head straight to the hospital, no questions asked." "Promise?" I placed my hand over his. "I promise," I said, giving him a reassuring smile. "I'll be careful. I want to be there for Lisa. I wouldn't feel right if I missed it." He nodded, pressing a kiss to my forehead. "You're amazing, you know that?" When we arrived at the venue, I felt a wave of nostalgia wash over me. It was a beautiful, sprawling estate with gardens blooming in a riot of colors, all meticulously arranged for the ceremony. Lisa looked radiant in her gown, glowing with joy as she made her way through a sea of people, embracing each guest. When she saw us, she broke into a wide smile, making a beeline for me. "Oh my gosh, Gwen, you made it!" She wrapped her arms around me, careful of my belly. "Thank you so much for being here. I was afraid after yesterday. Well, never mind. I'm just so happy you're here. I wouldn't have missed it for anything," I said, squeezing her hand. "You look stunning, Lisa." Her eyes sparkled with tears, and she hugged me again. But just as we pulled apart, I caught a glimpse of Margaret standing nearby, watching us with her arms crossed. The hard look on her face reminded me of our conversation from the day before, and my stomach twisted uncomfortably. Trying to brush it off, I spent most of the ceremony tucked into a corner near the back. Jason stayed close to me, checking on me constantly, though I insisted I was fine. But I noticed Margaret eyeing me every time I shifted in my seat or rested my hand on my belly. It was as if she expected me to cause some kind of scene at any moment. I could almost feel her judging me, assuming I'd steal attention from her daughter's special day. Once the ceremony was over and guests began mingling in the reception area, Margaret made her way over to us. She looked me up and down with that same stern expression she always wore around me. "Gwen," she said in a low voice, her eyes narrowing slightly, "you should rest. There's no need to be in the middle of things. After all, you're here for Lisa, not to socialize." Jason's hand immediately went to my back, his expression hardening. "Mom, Gwen is fine," he replied, his voice calm but laced with a hint of warning. She's not doing anything wrong. Margaret raised her eyebrows, her lips pulling into a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. I'm only concerned for her health. And for Lisa's big day, of course. I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully. I appreciate your concern, Margaret, but I know my own limits. I'm just here to support Lisa like we talked about. She didn't respond, only pursed her lips before giving a slight nod. Then she stepped away, moving to speak with some of her friends. I glanced at Jason, and he let out a long sigh. Gwen, I'm so sorry. I know she's making this harder than it needs to be, he said, running a hand through his hair. I'll talk to her if she keeps this up. It's okay, I replied, squeezing his hand. Let's just focus on Lisa. This day isn't about Margaret. It's about her. And for a while, it really did feel like it was all about Lisa. We watched her share her first dance with her husband, caught up in the beauty of the moment, and I felt such genuine happiness for her. But as the night wore on, my nerves started to catch up with me, the ache in my back growing sharper with each passing hour. I chalked it up to exhaustion, brushing aside Jason's worried glances. By the time dinner was being served, my backache had become a dull, throbbing pain, and I was starting to feel lightheaded. I glanced at Jason, who noticed immediately. You okay? He asked, his hand slipping protectively around my shoulder. His eyes were full of concern, and I could tell he was already preparing to suggest we leave. I nodded, taking a deep breath. Yeah, I think I just need to stretch my legs a bit. I'll be back in a few minutes. Jason started to stand, ready to come with me, but I waved him off. You stay. I'll just walk around, maybe go upstairs to sit quietly for a bit. He looked hesitant, but finally nodded. All right, but call me if you need anything. I'll come get you. I made my way through the crowd, smiling politely at guests who offered congratulations or stopped me for small talk, even though all I wanted was to find a quiet corner to sit and catch my breath. The pain in my back was intensifying, coming in waves now. As I reached the staircase, I held onto the banister, breathing deeply to calm myself. Just as I took the first step up, Margaret's voice called out from behind me. Gwen, where are you going? I turned slowly, hoping she wouldn't notice the strain on my face. Just taking a moment to rest upstairs, I said, trying to keep my tone even. I'll be back down soon. Margaret's brow furrowed, and she took a step closer, lowering her voice. Are you sure you can't just rest here? You know, away from everyone's view. The way she said it, everyone's view. It was like she genuinely thought I was trying to steal attention. I forced a smile, feeling my patience stretch thin. I just need a minute, Margaret. I'll be out of the way, I promise. She pursed her lips, looking as if she wanted to say more, but then she stepped aside, allowing me to continue up the stairs. Fine, but don't stay too long. Lisa wants her guests downstairs. Her words echoed in my mind as I climbed each step, trying to tune out the pain that was quickly turning sharper, more urgent. By the time I reached the upstairs bathroom, I could barely stand upright. I leaned against the sink, clutching the edge and focusing on my breathing, hoping this was just a false alarm. But deep down, I could feel it. The contractions were starting. A wave of fear washed over me as I fumbled for my phone, my hands trembling. I tried to call Jason, but before I could press dial, the door burst open, and Margaret stepped in, her face tight with irritation. Gwen, honestly, she snapped, closing the door firmly behind her. You're supposed to be supporting Lisa, not running off to hide. People are asking where you are. Margaret, please, I gasped, clutching my belly as another wave of pain hit. I think I need to go to the hospital. My water might be about to break. Her eyes narrowed, a flash of something cold crossing her face. She stepped closer, her gaze fixed intently on me. Can't you wait just an hour? She whispered, her voice steely. Lisa deserves this day, without any disruptions. You can handle a bit of discomfort. Don't make a scene. I stared at her in disbelief, feeling a mix of anger and panic rising in my chest. Margaret, I'm in labor. I need to leave now. Instead of showing concern or stepping aside, Margaret's face hardened. She reached over and, to my horror, snatched my phone out of my hand. You can't just leave in the middle of the wedding, she hissed. Just hold on. Lisa has waited her whole life for this day. Can't you understand that? My heart pounded as I watched her slip my phone into her purse, her expression unyielding. I felt trapped, the ache in my back now an excruciating pain that shot through my whole body. "Margaret, please, give me my phone," I managed to say, my voice cracking. But she only shook her head, her eyes cold and unsympathetic. "No, Gwen," she said firmly. "Not until the ceremony is over." With that, she turned her back, leaving me trembling and panicked, a prisoner in the upstairs bathroom as the sounds of celebration continued downstairs, oblivious to the nightmare beginning to unfold. Panic gripped me as I clung to the bathroom counter, feeling the room start to spin. I was breathing hard, trying to stay calm, but every wave of pain felt sharper, fiercer, as if my body was pushing against every ounce of resistance Margaret had imposed. I banged on the door, hoping someone might hear me over the music drifting up from the reception downstairs. "Help!" I yelled, my voice straining. "Someone, please!" My shouts went unanswered, swallowed by the thick wooden door and the noise from the wedding. I glanced around the small bathroom, desperately looking for anything that could help me, anything that would let me reach Jason or someone downstairs. But I had no phone, no strength, and nowhere to go. It wasn't long before another contraction hit, this one stronger, more intense than before. The pressure made it hard to breathe, and my knees began to buckle. Leaning back against the wall, I tried to focus on breathing slowly, fighting the mounting dread. I knocked on the door again, my voice breaking. "Please, someone." A few minutes passed, maybe longer, but then, suddenly, I heard footsteps. My heart leapt with a flash of hope, but then Margaret's face appeared as she slipped back into the bathroom, closing the door with a slow, quiet click. She didn't say anything at first, just looked at me, her expression unreadable. "Margaret, I need help. Please." I felt the words coming out like a plea, too tired to hold on to any pride or anger. "This is serious," she sighed, crossing her arms. "Do you realize how much this would upset Jason?" she said quietly, as if weighing her words carefully. "He's been so stressed lately. This would ruin everything." I stared at her, hardly able to believe what I was hearing. She seemed to be blaming me, as if my labor was some calculated move to pull attention away from the wedding. "This isn't about Jason or Lisa or anyone else," I managed to say, feeling anger start to crack through my fear. "This is about my child, your granddaughter, and me. We're both in danger if I stay here." For a moment, Margaret's face softened just slightly, as if she were genuinely considering my words. But then, as quickly as it had appeared, the softness vanished. Her eyes grew colder, more resolute. "If you just waited until tomorrow to go into labor, things would have been easier for everyone." Her voice was calm, almost clinical, and she leaned against the door, blocking any chance of escape. "But you couldn't even do that, could you?" I felt a flash of rage so fierce that it momentarily drowned out the pain. "I don't get to choose when my baby decides to come, Margaret. This isn't something I can just turn on or off." My voice echoed in the small space, the frustration and desperation clawing up my throat. I was so angry I could barely see straight, but another contraction shot through me, cutting off my words and forcing me to grip the edge of the sink as I doubled over. Margaret watched, unmoved, her expression stony. "You don't understand," she whispered, as if she were talking to herself more than me. "Lisa's happiness, our family's reputation, it all rides on this day going perfectly. I won't let anything ruin it." With that, she took a step back, her hand resting protectively over the purse where she'd stashed my phone. My hope was slipping away fast. My strength was fading even faster. The last thing I saw before my vision began to blur was the door closing, leaving me trapped, alone, and helpless, listening to the muffled sounds of celebration just beyond my reach. I don't know how long I was there, but I remember screaming. I yelled and pounded on the door until my throat was raw and my fists were bruised. Panic surged through me as the pain intensified, sharp and merciless, each contraction wringing out the last of my strength. I tried to stand, but my legs gave out, and I slumped to the floor, gripping my belly, my daughter, as terror flooded through me. The pain was overwhelming, but the The fear that I might be left there, that no one would find me. That was worse. The last thing I remember was calling Jason's name one last time, my voice barely a whisper before the darkness overtook me. When I opened my eyes, I was somewhere else. A hospital ceiling loomed above me, the sterile white lights blinding. I blinked, trying to make sense of where I was, why everything below my waist ached with a dull, unrelenting pain. I reached down instinctively, searching for the round fullness of my belly, but it was gone. In its place was an emptiness that sent a shock of fear straight through me. I turned my head, desperate for some kind of answer, and saw Jason sitting beside me, his eyes red-rimmed, relief etched across his face. He reached for my hand, holding it tightly as if afraid I'd slip away again. "Jason?" I managed, my voice weak, the questions jumbling together in my mind. "What happened? Where's Our daughter's fine," he interrupted, squeezing my hand, his voice thick with emotion. "She's here, Gwen. She's perfect. You did it." A flood of emotions rushed over me. Relief, joy, confusion, but also an overwhelming sense of emptiness. I closed my eyes, trying to piece together what had happened, but the memories were hazy, scattered fragments that slipped through my grasp. I looked back at Jason, desperate for answers. "I don't remember. I was in the bathroom, and then—" Jason's face tightened, and I saw a flash of anger in his eyes, though he tried to keep his voice steady. "Margaret," he said, almost in a whisper, as if saying her name hurt. "She confessed everything. She left you there, locked you in, and took your phone. She didn't want you to cause a scene at the wedding." I don't know what she was thinking. The reality of his words hit me, cold and heavy, as the memories started to trickle back in pieces. Margaret's voice, the cold look in her eyes as she took my phone, her refusal to let me leave. I could feel the betrayal, a sharp ache that went deeper than the physical pain. Jason's voice softened, and he brushed a hand gently across my cheek. "I noticed you were gone for a long time. At first, I thought you were just resting. Mom said you'd gone to lie down because you were feeling unwell, and she kept brushing me off, saying you needed peace and quiet." His hand tightened around mine, as if to ground himself. But I couldn't shake the feeling something was wrong. After a while, I couldn't ignore it anymore. I started calling for you, went up to the second floor. Then I saw the bathroom door locked. I knew. He paused, his voice breaking slightly. "I kicked the door in, Gwen. You were unconscious, on the floor, and there was blood. I thought I'd lost you both." A tear slipped down his cheek as he looked at me, still gripping my hand, his knuckles white. It was like waking up in a nightmare. "I carried you out and drove straight to the hospital. They had to wake you before you could deliver, but our little girl, she's strong. She's here because of you." I felt a surge of relief, mixed with anger and sorrow. But Jason's presence, his steady hand in mine, kept me grounded. I tried to hold on to the moment, focusing on his words, letting his warmth calm the rush of emotions. Just then, a doctor entered, offering a kind smile as he approached the bed. "Mrs. Taylor, how are you feeling?" I took a shaky breath, nodding. "Better, I think. Just a little lost." He nodded, his expression gentle. "That's normal. With the stress and the fainting spell, it's not unusual to experience some temporary memory loss. It should come back over time, but for now, take it easy and focus on recovery." As he finished speaking, he stepped out for a moment and returned with a nurse, who was cradling a tiny bundle wrapped in a soft pink blanket. She approached me with a warm smile, gently placing my daughter in my arms. I looked down at her, feeling a surge of love so powerful it almost took my breath away. She was perfect, tiny, with delicate features and wisps of dark hair, her face scrunched up in peaceful sleep. In that moment, all the fear, the pain, the anger, it melted away, replaced by an overwhelming sense of joy and completeness. She was here, safe in my arms, and for the first time, I felt like everything would be okay. Jason watched us, a look of awe and tenderness in his eyes. He leaned over, brushing his fingers across her cheek, his voice filled with emotion. "She's beautiful, Gwen. Just like you." I managed a weak smile, still feeling the fog of everything I'd been through. "I can't believe she's here," I whispered, my eyes filling with tears. All I wanted was to make it through the day for her, for us, and Margaret. I trailed off, my voice catching. Jason's expression hardened, and he gave my hand a reassuring squeeze. "Gwen, you never have to worry about her again," he said firmly, his tone almost unrecognizable, filled with a quiet but fierce determination. "I told her she's out of our lives. I don't want her anywhere near you or our daughter after what she did. She put both of you at risk, all because she cared more about appearances than your safety. I can't forgive that. Ever." I looked at him, feeling the weight of what he was saying, the depth of the betrayal. I had known Margaret could be difficult, that her need for control often outweighed her sense of compassion, but I had never expected her to go this far. To leave me in that room, locked away, while I struggled in pain. My heart ached not only for what she'd done to me, but also for what Jason was feeling, the loss of his trust in his own mother. "Are you sure?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "I know she's your mother, Jason." Jason shook his head, his jaw clenched. "She may be my mother, but you're my family now. You and our daughter are what matter to me." He leaned forward, his forehead resting against mine, his voice softening. "I love you, Gwen. I can't imagine my life without you too. Nothing, not even her, will come between us." I closed my eyes, letting his words settle over me, a sense of peace slowly replacing the turmoil. I didn't want to feel the anger anymore. I wanted to move forward, to focus on our daughter, on our future together as a family. Jason's support was a lifeline, a promise that I wouldn't have to face this pain alone. A nurse entered the room then, her voice gentle as she checked on us. "Would you like me to help with anything, or should I give you a bit more time with your little ones?" Jason smiled at her, nodding gratefully. "I think we're okay for now. Just thank you for everything." The nurse nodded, offering a warm smile. "I'll be back to check on you both soon," she said softly, giving us a bit of privacy. As the door closed behind her, Jason settled beside me, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. We sat there in silence for a while, watching our daughter sleep, both of us lost in the miracle of this little life we'd created together. It was as if the storm had passed, leaving only the quiet promise of a new beginning. The days following our daughter's birth passed in a surreal blur. Between the nurse's constant check-ins, the well-wishers, and the flood of emotions that came with being new parents, Jason and I barely had time to process what had happened. But with every quiet moment, the reality of Margaret's betrayal settled deeper into my heart, leaving a cold ache that was hard to ignore. Jason stayed by my side almost every moment. He would watch over our daughter with an expression that softened every time she opened her eyes, his whole world revolving around her tiny presence. When he wasn't gazing at her, he was watching over me, reassuring me with every glance, every gentle touch. On our second night at the hospital, he sat beside me as I cradled our daughter, his eyes distant. I knew he was wrestling with everything that had happened, the pain visible in the lines of his face. "Jason," I asked quietly, shifting slightly to catch his gaze. Are you all right?" He exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck before answering. "I don't know, Gwen. I keep replaying that night, thinking of how she stood there, lying to my face, telling me you were fine, that you just needed rest, when you were locked up, alone, and in pain." He paused, his fists clenching, and his voice dropped to a whisper. "I trusted her, Gwen. I thought she'd be there for you. For us. But I can't understand. I can't even begin to understand why she would do something like this." I placed a hand on his arm, feeling the tension thrumming through him. "Jason, it wasn't your fault. None of this was your fault. Margaret chose to put her pride above everything else, and that's on her, not you." Jason looked at me, his face torn between anger and sorrow. "But she's my mother. I just never thought this would be possible." I nodded, understanding the pain in his words. Margaret's actions hadn't only hurt me. They'd shattered something in Jason, too, something that couldn't be easily repaired. Jason took a deep breath, then looked down at our daughter, who was sleeping peacefully in my arms. "I'll never let her hurt you again. Either of you. I don't want her near us." I don't care if she's my mother. His voice was strong, but I could hear the pain that lingered beneath the conviction. Margaret's absence would be a wound for Jason, one he'd carry long after this moment. But he was making this choice for us, for our family. A gentle knock on the door interrupted us, and we both looked up as Lisa slipped quietly into the room. Her face was pale, her expression a mixture of exhaustion and something deeper, something like guilt. She gave us a small smile and stepped closer, her eyes fixed on our daughter. "Hey," she whispered, barely meeting our gaze. I'm sorry to come by so late. I needed to see her. And to see you, Gwen." I managed a small smile, holding our daughter a little closer. "Thank you, Lisa." She hesitated, glancing down, then took a breath, her voice barely audible. I heard what happened. Margaret told me everything." Her voice caught, and she shook her head, eyes brimming with regret. "I don't know how to make sense of it. I had no idea she would go so far." Jason's expression softened slightly, and he gave his sister a reassuring nod. "You're not responsible for her actions, Lisa. None of this was your fault." Lisa swallowed, tears slipping down her cheeks. "But it was my wedding. She did it because of me. I didn't want her to hurt anyone, especially not you, Gwen." I reached out, squeezing her hand gently. "Lisa, none of us could have predicted this. Your wedding was beautiful, and none of this should take away from that. Margaret made her own choices." Lisa nodded, wiping her tears, and she leaned over, gazing at our daughter with a soft, bittersweet smile. "She's perfect," she whispered, reaching down to brush her tiny fingers across our daughter's hand. "And I want you to know, no matter what happens with Mom, I'll always be here for her. For both of you." The three of us sat there in silence, connected by both love and the lingering pain of what had happened. It was a small comfort, knowing that Jason's family was still there for us, that even in the wake of Margaret's actions, there were bonds that couldn't be broken. The day finally came for us to take our daughter home. As we packed up our things, I felt a mix of excitement and nerves. Our tiny family was stepping into a new beginning, and although I was eager to leave the hospital, I also felt the weight of everything we'd been through settling heavily in my chest. Jason carried our daughter out of the hospital with such care, his face glowing with pride as he tucked her into the car seat. I couldn't help but smile, watching him adjust the straps and make sure she was perfectly safe. Once we were on the road, Jason reached over and squeezed my hand. "We're going to make this place a real home for her, Gwen," he said softly, his gaze focused on the road but his words wrapped in a warmth that filled my heart. "A place where she'll feel safe and loved, no matter what." I nodded, taking a deep breath and letting his words settle. As the familiar streets passed by, I found myself imagining our future, one filled with bedtime stories, baby giggles, and the warmth of a home built on love and trust. When we arrived home, Jason helped me settle onto the couch, carefully placing our daughter in my arms. She looked up at me with sleepy eyes, her tiny fists curled against her cheeks, and in that moment, everything else faded away. I held her close, feeling a surge of love so powerful it erased all my lingering fears, if only for a moment. A few days later, we got an answer to my unspoken questions. It was late in the evening, and Jason and I had just put our daughter down for a nap. The house was quiet, peaceful, until a loud knock at the door shattered the calm. Jason and I exchanged a look, our hearts pounding as we made our way to the door. As soon as Jason opened it, I felt my stomach twist. Standing on our doorstep was Margaret, her face a mixture of desperation and defiance. She looked at us with wide, pleading eyes, her hands wringing nervously. "Jason," she began, her voice trembling. "Please, I just want to see my granddaughter. I need to make this right." Jason's face hardened, his jaw clenched, and he stepped outside, closing the door behind him to keep her from coming in. I stood just inside, able to hear every word, my heart racing as I listened. "Mom, I don't think you understand the damage you've done," Jason said, his voice barely controlled. "You put Gwen's life and our daughter's life in danger, all because of your need to control everything. That's not something I can forgive. Not now, maybe not ever." Margaret's voice cracked as she tried to respond. Jason, I only wanted the day to be perfect for Lisa. I didn't realize. No, Jason interrupted sharply. Don't make excuses. You knew Gwen was in labor, and you locked her in that bathroom. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was cruelty. And I won't let you back into our lives after that. I heard Margaret's quiet sobs, her voice choked with desperation. Please, Jason, I'm your mother. I know I made a mistake, but please, let me be a part of my granddaughter's life. Jason took a long pause, his voice heavy with the weight of finality when he spoke again. You chose your own pride over the safety of my wife and daughter. That was your decision, and now this is mine. You're not welcome here, Mom. Please leave. The silence that followed was thick, heavy with all the things left unsaid. I could hear Margaret's soft, broken weeping as she turned and walked away, her footsteps fading until the night swallowed them completely. When Jason came back inside, he closed the door gently, his shoulders slumping as he let out a deep sigh. I stepped forward, wrapping my arms around him, feeling the tension slowly leave his body as he held me close. It's over, he whispered, his voice shaky. We're done with her. I looked up at him, feeling both the relief and the sadness that his words brought. I knew how much this had cost him, how painful it was to sever that bond. But I also knew it was what we needed to protect our family, to start fresh without the fear of Margaret's interference. As we stood there together, wrapped in the quiet strength of our love, I realized that this was our new beginning. It wouldn't be easy, and there would be moments when the pain of Margaret's betrayal resurfaced. But together, we would build a life of peace, a life filled with love and safety for our daughter. And that was all that mattered now. The weeks after our daughter's birth brought an unexpected peace, a rhythm we fell into slowly as we adjusted to our new life as parents. Every day brought small moments of joy, seeing our daughter's sleepy yawns, feeling her tiny fingers curl around ours, watching her drift off to sleep in Jason's arms. In those quiet moments, it felt like we'd left the worst behind us. But Margaret's actions still haunted us, a shadow we couldn't ignore. She began sending messages, leaving pleading voicemails on Jason's phone, and even slipping notes into our mailbox. Each note was an apology, a desperate plea to see her granddaughter. But Jason was resolute. He wouldn't respond, wouldn't let her near us again. He knew that her presence, her influence, could only bring pain and confusion into our daughter's life. And neither of us was willing to allow that. One Sunday afternoon, Lisa and Sam visited. They'd been a constant source of support since the wedding, and their love for our daughter brought a new depth to our family. As they held her, rocking her gently, I felt a sense of healing settle over us. Margaret might have broken the trust we'd once had in her, but the rest of Jason's family had shown us that love could still prevail. Lisa looked down at our daughter with a sad smile. She's beautiful, Gwen. I still can't believe what happened. How Mom could do something so terrible. It's like she was blinded by her own pride. I nodded, a twinge of pain at the memory. Sometimes people are so caught up in their own world that they forget the real damage they're causing. But we're moving forward. She's safe now, and that's what matters most. Sam's voice was firm as she took my hand. Whatever happens with Mom, we'll always be here for you, for both of you. We're family, and we'll do whatever it takes to protect that. Jason looked at his sisters, his expression softened by gratitude. Thank you. I don't know where we'd be without you both. As we sat there together, the four of us found comfort in the unspoken promise we shared to create a safe, loving family despite everything we'd been through. For the first time, I felt the weight of Margaret's actions begin to lift, replaced by a hopeful determination for our future. That night, after everyone had left, Jason and I found ourselves standing together over our daughter's crib. She lay there, fast asleep, her soft breaths rising and falling in the dim light. Jason slipped his arm around me, pulling me close, his gaze fixed lovingly on her. She's perfect, he whispered, his voice filled with awe. And no matter what it took to get here, no matter what we had to go through, I'd do it all again just to have her with us. I felt a warmth spread through me as I looked at him, knowing he meant every word. "So would I murmured. "We've come through so much, Jason. But now, we can finally build the life we've dreamed of, a life filled with love and safety." He turned to me, brushing a gentle hand against my cheek. "And I'll protect both of you, always," he said quietly, his voice strong and steady. "This is our family, and nothing will ever threaten that again." As we stood together in the dim glow of our daughter's nursery, I felt a powerful sense of release. The pain, the fear, the betrayal, they were only memories now, part of a story we'd overcome. All that mattered was the love we'd built, a love that would carry us forward, guiding us through every challenge. And in that moment, I knew we'd found our way home, finally free to embrace the future we'd created, one filled with light, laughter, and the unbreakable bonds of our little family.